And hello and welcome to AleksConnects Creative Soundbacks. My name is Alex and let's continue our Fanart project Angry Birds vs Transformers. So today's stream is going to be rather short. Let's just, by the way, establish the time frames right away. Forgot to change it. So it's going to be somewhat about 1.5 hours, something like that. So during this time, hopefully I will manage to cover things. By the way, previous stream I forgot to kinda reset the time, so at the end of the previous stream, the time up out of 2 hours was probably in the mark of almost 5 hours, which was weird. So yeah. So in the previous session, for the most part, we kind of posed our basically we posed mannequin in order to figure out the pose for the transformer in order to picture it in our brain a little bit better. Because again, as I said before, the one thing that as artists we need to do is we need to picture things as clear as possible. And if you don't have that much visual library, or like if your visual library is not that rich, or you're still kind of in this area that you're not sure if you're capable to picture something or not, usually of course we need to kind of at the beginning rely on references until we will gather this visual library, and even then relying on references is just going to make things look a little bit more professional. Again, never disregard references. They're super important because they are the things that help us to bring things from our imagination to life. This is not just something that we need to kind of take and use in its actual form. We need to use it in order to create an additional layer for us to build upon, and the more layers again we will build up, the clearer the vision of what we pictured and what we imagined are going to be up there. So I'm going to put this thing on the second monitor because we're definitely going to kind of use it, hopefully at least. And I'm not going to use necessarily this one, although we probably should, because cool. Why every time that I'm start streaming I want to sleep? Maybe because I'm streaming at the end of the day, closer to the time that I need to sleep, because this is kind of, for now, the only time that I can do that. So let's think. So I thought that I will change something in the pose, but I actually decided not to, because for the most part I like how things look. And since we're going to deal with the transformer, we don't need to create like super realistic pose for our mannequin, because transformer are going to change in the by adding organic and non-organic elements. So for the most part, the one thing that I wanted from this pose is to fill the gesture, or fill the movement, or just basically fill the body language of the character and picture it better in my mind. Of course it's not enough, like it definitely could be pushed a little bit further and accentuate a little bit better, but we're not going to stress about that much, because we actually need to kind of move forward. Because again, I'm sticking to this project for already probably 4 months or even more, and it's kind of sometimes again super frustrating when you staying in one position and not necessarily moving forward. And I wouldn't say that I didn't move forward, because again we worked with understanding a pretty big theoretical stuff about perspective that we didn't establish before, and this information is crucial for us in like to understand it and know what we're dealing with in order to continue or proceed forward. So because of that, like of course I don't know, pretty clearly I established that for myself, so I'm not that like super stressing about the fact that I'm staying in one place, because there's a big reason why. And again, it's not necessarily staying in one place, so the progress of the work itself kind of froze, but the progress of learning and the progress of kind of understanding your own process, it's continuing. So as the cool thing about us as human beings, we need to feel some type of growth in order to feel fulfilled, or basically to feel happy in a certain time. Like if we don't have this level of progression, and if we feel like we're stuck and we're not necessarily moving anywhere, it kind of brings a lot of frustrations. And one of the ways to kind of not allow these things happen is to understand the reasons behind you're doing certain things, and know and basically try to talk yourself through it, like almost. Again, I talked about the inner dialogue in the previous streams, so basically to kind of keep up with your own inner dialogue and basically talk yourself through these situations and ask yourself questions why you're doing this thing, and like is that actually bringing you somewhere, or you're just staying in one place and not necessarily moving. So again, I'm constantly asking myself these questions, and yes, we stayed on this thing for a long time, but I definitely learned a lot from it, and I constantly understood that yes, the project itself kind of stuck, but there's a reason behind this project why it's stuck. And although the project itself stopped or paused, it doesn't mean that the progress itself paused to it actually continuing and actually moving. So and that means that the growth itself is still present. It's just not apparent in this project necessarily yet. So, and now, like starting from the previous session, I kind of decided, okay, I kind of feel like I'm going in circles now, and if I'm going to stay there for longer, then I will start to feel this weird feeling that I'm not necessarily moving. I'm just like staying in one place. And of course, in order to get out of it, we just need to realize when we need to stop doing one thing and move on to the other. So in our case, the problem was when we need to understand where we need to stop studying things and actually move on to using the information that we studied and implement it into our work. Because especially like with the type of thinking that I'm using, usually it's pretty hard for me to like stop doing some type of study until I will make sure that I'm going to use the study in the most possible like situations. So I'm all about efficient studying. I hate just study for the sake of studying. For me, it just like it blows my mind basically. I can't bear the studying for the sake of studying, and I get that there's a lot of artists that know that the only way to grow is to study, and for them, again, it works. But personally for me, it just doesn't work. This aimless type of studying when I'm not necessarily knowing what I'm studying, just studying for the sake of studying. For me, it's not an efficient way. My brain can't accept that. And believe me, I tried all methods that's out there. Not necessarily all, but all existing that I stumbled upon and actually tried. All methods that I was aware of, let's just say it like that. Because you can try everything, because there's a lot of things. And neither of those worked. And I kind of found a perfect way for me to work and study these things. And for me, the perfect way to study is to study while I'm creating something. And this was the whole reason behind everything that I'm doing now. So yes, it's slow. Yes, I'm sticking on this project for a long period of time, but during this project I'm studying things that I'm going to use in all my future work. And the fact that I'm going to focus on these things while solving the actual problems and not just going through some aimless study that I'm going to forget the next day. It's going to create better experience. It's going to create better overall, basically the much more stronger pathways inside of my brain, like the neural pathways that basically will allow me to, I don't know, absorb all this information that we went through, and not just kind of halfway, I don't know, try it and then forget it. So again, I'm all about efficiency, and again, the key to efficiency that I kind of found for myself personally is to control things, like to control creation, to control like almost every step of the way that we can control. So again, everything we can control, we controlling. The things that we can't control, we find a different way to kind of solve these problems. And because again, I definitely, like, I don't feel like I'm a control freak, although it might sound like it when I'm constantly talking about control. But again, like, and someone, if he or she knows like psychology, could actually dig deeper and try to tie this to the actual life, like the person that usually don't have the control in their life wants to seek control in other areas. And this is not the case. I'm actually like pretty happy with where I am, and I actually feeling the control and in life itself and in artistic freedom too. And like what I'm doing now is just basically trying to implement the, like, because I know that human beings, we kind of want to control things. So this is in our nature, because control brings us confidence, and like it makes sure that we are going to, like, I don't know, it just brings us a little bit much more comfort, I would say, and because of that, like, it's kind of makes us a little bit more, I don't know, as artists, just basically makes us more professional, I guess. Again, I'm looking at this from this professional standpoint. If you want to be a professional, you need to understand and know what you're doing, and in order to do that, you need to understand how to control things. So it's kind of the same. If you want to be a pilot, you need to understand how to control a plane. And although you can't control a plane fully, because there are always going to be things outside of your control, such as like the weather and different conditions that you might find yourself in, like, and some technical problems, but still we need to know and understand all possible scenarios and just basically know how to solve these problems. And by preparing ourselves to do that, we're kind of not necessarily 100% are going to be prepared, but we're going to be as prepared as we can. So it's all about preparation. It's all about like that. So yeah, let's just stop talking and continue to do things. So basically, yeah, today I'm going to be super calm. I want to reserve my energy because I want to sleep, and if I want to actually produce something today, I need to kind of stay low-key, and because of that, I'm kind of keeping my voice a little bit down, yeah. Today I'm going to be kind of a boring, calm and collected, and kind of peaceful. I'd say, no, not peaceful necessarily, but basically I'm just going to go through it in a little bit more peaceful atmosphere. Because the thing about the problems that I'm not necessarily 100% sure how to solve, they're usually makes me in the moment a little bit panicky. I don't know, I'm just basically going through a little bit of a panic, And this is an inner panic. It's nothing outside. So like, it's something that just basically makes me a little bit worried. And when I'm kind of feeling like I'm not going to be able to solve this problem in the way that I would picture it in my mind, it always kind of brings a lot of negative feelings, such as like, oh no, I'm like, I thought that I could do a better job, but not. And you're basically going through a lot of like not cool feelings there. So, and since the cool thing is that we established a pose, so now having a pose, it actually brings a little bit more confidence. So because like maybe like I didn't have enough confidence to draw this pose without the help of a mannequin, although these poses were drawn out of my mind and they actually look pretty solid, like pretty good for the sketch, and we actually could use these elements in order to draw a pose without the problems. And we not necessarily had to use mannequin, but again, it's always a good thing to have as much resources as possible at your disposal in order to solve certain problems, because this is definitely will help you to achieve better results. So usually the problem that I'm having when it comes down to these problems, such as like putting the whole character in the certain pose and making sure that it's going to fit perspective, and using the knowledge of that we established so far about the rotation in perspective, like usually the problem is that separately I can solve these problems without that much of a problem. So but once they combine, since there's still no links inside of your brain how these things are connected, it's pretty hard to put them together. So it's pretty weird. It just by the way, this is one of the things that usually beginners are experiencing, and or people without experience in certain areas, which is I believe my case. Again, I don't have experience in certain areas, and because of that, I'm not considering myself a beginner, because again, I hope I already got out of the beginner stage a long time ago, but I still kind of, when it comes down to theory at least, and the knowledge that I like possess theoretically doesn't allow me to feel like a beginner. It's just the way it is. I don't know, but sometimes like when I'm dealing with something that I don't have experience in, I'm kind of feeling like a beginner. And maybe it's a good thing, because when you are kind of, if you can do a certain, like, if you can produce pretty decent results, or at least the results that you are happy with, and they appear pretty cool to the audience too, because again, we have to remember that the way that we perceive our growth is different from the growth from how people are going to see our skills. So basically, the things that we're capable of for us could look at, like, be perceived as something that we're proud of, but for others they could think that this is complete trash, and it doesn't and we are complete beginner. So it all depends on your kind of overall artistic growth and your perception, what you perceive a good art and bad art, or just, let's not talk about good and bad art, let's just talk about like the art that still lacks confidence and knowledge and experience, and the art that screams experience, confidence, and knowledge. So, because again, there's no bad and good art, it's just an art that goes through different stages, and sometimes if you're not familiar with a certain subject, you could feel like you at the at this stage that you don't have nor information nor confidence about this object or subject that you're drawing, and it makes you feel like you are beginner, and it kind of throws you back to the beginning, which is a good thing, because every time that we're trying to learn something new, it kind of adds a new level of fulfillment to our I don't know, to our psychology. I don't know, because it means that we're going out of our comfort zone and not staying in one place. And if everything seems easy, that means that it's something bad. It's basically something wrong, and we need to kind of figure out within what comfort zone we're staying that make things for us too easy, and actually push ourselves in order to get out of this comfort zone and actually face things that are super uncomfortable to draw, or super uncomfortable to deal with, that will actually help us to grow as an artist. Again, this is just my belief, and that's like everyone has its own way of looking at artistic growth, or not art itself. So is, of course, life too. And for me, all these things are kind of how I look at certain elements. So okay. So the one thing again that I'm having troubles with, it's pretty hard for me to start right now, because I have too much kind of unnecessary information, but at the same time information that will definitely help me to create a better result. And my brain is basically trying to put together these static cubes that we drawn, the perspective itself, the fact that these cubes are going to be rotated, so information that we established about the rotation, what else, the design of the transformer too. It kind of plays a pretty big part in my decision right now, why I'm basically not sure to proceed to this next stage. So a lot of factors that actually kind of overwhelms the brain and makes me feel like, oh snap, I can't do this because I can't deal with all of these problems right away. Again, separately I can solve them without hesitation, but once they getting connected together, it makes things much harder to kind of operate with them. And it's all about the fear, because because we kind of uncertain or how combining these things will help us. It makes us so until we produce some type of result, we're not sure if it's going to work or not. And sometimes in these stages of hesitation, it kind of could bring the worst in you. At least it kind of brings a pretty I don't know, uneasy feelings, such as the fact that I draw everything in here and I just basically do it pointless, because I probably not going to use it, because again there's too much information to combine. But at the same time, I understand that even if I'm going to use this information, it's definitely going to help me. But since I'm having troubles with properly using it, it makes me weird. So sorry if I'm actually talking about these type of things a lot. Again, this is one of the things that I want to provide in my streams. I just as I said before, I truly believe that if artists would talk more about about their feelings towards certain problems, it would make the beginner's job in learning a little bit easier, because they would find something similar that they're constantly experiencing. And again, one thing that as human beings we always seeking is the way to relate. So if we find something relatable with another person, especially if this person doing similar or exactly the thing that we want to do, we feel connected with him or her, and it kind of creates this bond, and it helps us to deal with this problem not alone, but actually with somewhat a virtual support. So the fact that not only I struggling with it, but actually someone's struggling with it too, kind of makes me feel not alone. And this is kind of a thing that I want to provide in these streams. I want to basically talk about these things, and maybe you're not struggling with that yet, but at some point you probably will. And these type of things, like the thinking about what you're feeling and how to deal with that, will help you to deal with these artistic problems better. Because again, I believe that art and psychology are connected, and you can't disconnect them at all. Throughout the years, the one thing that I figured it out, that they are connected. They're super connected. I don't know. I'm not seeing personally art outside of the psychology, and nor I see the psychology outside of the art. For me, these two things. So if you will want to become an artist, you will constantly deal with a lot of psychological problems, and again, I'm not talking about the actual illnesses that involve psychological issues like that. I'm talking about just basically a lot of inner conflicts that you're going to face, and in order to solve these inner conflicts, you need to understand yourself a little bit better. Then you probably will understand yourself at this point. And again, unfortunately, most of us, I don't think that we spend enough time to understand ourselves properly. We kind of constantly distracting ourselves with the things in the world, and it basically not allows us to I don't know, turned off everything, and basically shut down everything, and focus on our inner world. Ask ourselves questions: what we want, how we want to live our life, what do we want for our career, and how we want to, I don't know. Oh snap. So basically, these type of awesome questions are something that usually we're not asking ourselves, or at least we may be asking them these type of questions, but we're not spending enough time to actually figure this out, because trust me, it takes a lot of time. So if you think that sitting down and asking yourself questions and right away coming up with answers, this is the way to go, it's you probably never tried it. Because again, it took me years to figure out so easy stuff that was so, I don't know, clear once I figured this out. And I kind of sit and thought to myself, it was so freaking obvious. Why it took me so long to figure this out? And again, it all depends on what you seek. Sorry if I'm getting super confusing about what I'm talking. Again, I'm looking at art and life as as parallels, because I started to pursue art, it opened my eyes on almost everything, and basically because of art I found my purpose in life, and without it, I don't know what I would be at this point, because again, I just basically found my passion, and it's not only in art, it's just basically in creating something that could help others in some way, and for the most part, if it wasn't for art, I don't know where I would be at this point. If I would be somewhere, I would probably be miserable. So definitely not happy. So because again, yeah, let's just not dive into a story, or should I say a life story. Let's just focus more on these things. So again, sorry if I'm constantly going to switch to life stuff, because again, this is something that I feel connected to. Like art basically changed my life, and because of that, I'm constantly going to go like back to it. This is just something that I can't help, because again, I feel like these things connecting, and this is, by the way, one of the reasons why I decided to call my channels and everything that I'm going to create AleksConnects, because again, this is not necessarily me connecting stuff, it's just like the way that I am in my brain kind of connect these things. So I'm not going to connect things for others necessarily, but this is just a representation of me, like that, the fact that I am myself connecting all these dots together. So it's not a statement that I am some type of a guru or whatever that connects things for others. Not necessarily. Like the aim that I had behind the naming my channels and basically this as AleksConnects was the idea that I'm actually seeing everything kind of connected. So everything in life, everything in art that I experienced, everything in psychology, everything in the day-to-day stuff, and everything that surrounds us, I kind of feel like everything is connected, and this is just my way of looking at the world. And because of that, I kind of thought to myself, oh snap, this is ideal to just basically name it something that could represent like me as an artist, and at the same time kind of create something bigger than just me as an artist. So I don't know, this is just kind of a thing. So again, I know that the easiest thing for me is to stop worry about these construction things, and again, they already did their job. So one of the problems that I'm usually having is I'm spending all this time on creating these cubes and yes, preparing myself to draw things and whatever, but then once I will get to the stage of actually drawing, I'm feeling like I have too much information to control, and because of that, I'm super scared to proceed to the next stage. So for now, the only thing that I need to do is figure out the pose, which is kind of already there. Again, we already figured it out, the pose. And by the way, I completely forget how to move it. Select all, deselect. Yeah. Stylus and Blender for some reason doesn't rotate. Maybe I need to actually put the settings for buttons in here too. So again, we already kind of established the pose. We established pose earlier on the sketching stage, which is one of the kind of a important stuff. Again, the same was for this pose. I wasn't sure how to draw this pose necessarily, and I still kind of just went with it, and actually we come up with pretty decent results. And the cool thing is I have all information needed in order to actually create this pose and the final design. We already have some type of a thing in the sketch. We created a pose, a little bit more realistic representation of the pose. We established the levels of rotation for everything. We established the static for it. We understood how to put the static into dynamic. It seems like every part of information already was established, but the thing is, it still seems to me like I'm lacking some type of confidence, and I guess it's just all about not able at this point, since I don't have that much experience, to connect these dots together. So the cool thing is, all this information that we established earlier already kind of works. Not kind of, it actually works. So puppy. Oh snap, it actually could be a good idea to look at our illustration this way. Now we have a sketch. Let's put final line over. That was a mistake, because apparently we created a lot of whites in there, so okay, it works too. So we could use a sketch directly, we could use the placement for these things, we could use a lot of stuff. So for instance, I think what we need to do is just to find a balance and understand what we need to start with. But again, at this point it just feels too overwhelming for me to continue. And I get that these are just my fears, and the only way to push through this is to just stop complaining and whining and just do things. But again, we are a creature of old habits, and one of my oldest habits is procrastinate. When it comes down to hard things, and again, it took me a lot of time to actually learn how to overwhelm that, and in certain areas I know how to push through it. So for instance, when it comes down to sculpting, I'm not going to have problems with that, because it's a little bit more intuitive way of creating things. But the problem that I'm feeling, the problem is that I'm not seeing a 2D art for myself as thing that no, come on. I'm not seeing 2D art as intuitive thing. Nothing intuitive about 2D art at all, at least personally. For me, I already talked about intuitive stuff and non-intuitive stuff. So for instance, dealing with this one is intuitive for me, because I'm dealing with something that I can see, that I can rotate. I'm seeing these things in 3D already, and the only thing that I need to do is just to place them properly. The same kind of goes for sculpting. if I will start to sculpt something, I will start with a basic shape and then I will progress into a much more complex. The funny thing is, the same kind of goes for 2D, but it's much harder because we need to know how to do two things. First, we need to visualize, and usually in 3D it's kind of easier because we have 3D space to us. We don't need to create an illusion of reality. We just need to create a representation of reality. But when it comes down to a 2D, we need to know how to do both. We need to kind of know how it's going to look realistically, but at the same time understand how to actually create this realistic look. So that means that we need to understand how to create an illusion of reality. So, and for me, working with creating an illusion of reality, it's super hard thing to do. It was like right from the beginning, because it's just basically a skill that you need to develop through the years, and this is not something that you can teach yourself to do. It's just kind of a thing that will develop the more you will create and the more you will do stuff, because again, there are methods to creating an illusion of reality, but for the most part they all kind of revolve around the skills. So it's just your skills, how to combine with knowledge. You need to understand the form, you need to understand how to create this form, you need to understand construction. So again, the perspective is one of the tools that will help us to create an illusion of reality. Understanding light and form and basically values will help us to create an illusion of reality. So, but again, the understanding itself is not going to give us everything. We still need to kind of go through this experience in order to feel confident enough to solving these problems on the go. And since I don't have that, I don't have that experience, because of that, as you see, I'm struggling. So in 2D at least, because again, I'm not struggling in 3D because it's super intuitive for me to do that, but I want to produce 2D art, not 3D art, because again, 2D art has the freedom that 3D art doesn't have. And this was one of the kind of reasons behind me focusing more on 2D, but using 3D to understand 2D better. I believe that 2D art is one of the most complex artistic things out there, because the level of knowledge, the level of awareness, the level of a lot of things that you need to know, understand, and experience is so overwhelming that it's basically sometimes comes down to the understanding that I'm not going to be able to learn everything, and I just need to choose a certain area and work within this area. And this is probably one of the things that artists usually are doing. No one is trying to learn everything. They're just choosing a certain area. The common thing is to just choose a theme and stick to this theme and learn and perfect it. So you want to create a portrait, then you will probably are going to be a portraitist, or whatever how it's called in English, the one who draws portraits. If you want to if you want to draw environments, then you will become not environmentalist, something different. Either way. So but again, right from the beginning, I didn't want that. I wanted to create, I wanted to have this freedom. I don't want to focus on something like just one. And I figured out for myself the theme that I'm going to stick to, but this theme is broad and it's not strict to certain elements. So it has fantasy element to it, it has sci-fi element to it, it has a real element to it. So I could add everything that I want, but that kind of creates this overwhelming feeling that, oh freaking freak, I need to know everything, and I can't, because it's just not possible. Life is too short in order to learn things that are almost limitless. And because of that, I kind of super serious about art, and because of that I'm kind of going through all these this is one of the reasons why I'm talking about things more than I'm doing, because I want to make sure that everything that I'm going to do is going to have some purpose, and is going to have a reflection. So I don't want to create something just as a placeholder before I'm going to create something that I'm actually passionate about, or that I'm actually going to learn something from it. And I try to put this way of thinking into everything that I'm doing, not only into art but in life, and basically into business too, of course. I don't know what's happening with my eye. Either there's an eyelash there, which happens pretty constantly, or there's just a hair. These hair, they're a little bit longer, and they are getting in the way, and yeah. Ugh. Or I just want to sleep. This might be the case too, and my eyes is just basically tired. So for instance, if I'm going to get rid of everything in here, things will become easier, and it kind of will maybe even give me enough confidence to draw things. So there's a interesting psychology behind that. So if you have if you don't have any information, such as in here, so I don't have any information about this transformer, and ideally, if I'm not picturing it, I can't draw it, and it kind of creates a need to search, a need to study, and we did that. But once we went through studies, once we added some things, and these things kind of have the information that we need, then it becomes too much information. TMI. And this kind of the opposite. So without having any information, we didn't know what to do. With too much information, we don't know where to begin, because it's just basically too much of it. In both cases, we're probably going to be able to overcome this. Again, we already overcome something at the beginning when we dealt with sketches. So when we created this transformer, I wasn't sure how I'm going to do that. I didn't have any visuals to it. I just basically overcame this fear and started to draw it. In the end, we get results. This is kind of a one way to deal with this, but I think this way is a little bit easier, because once you will start to deal with something in here, step by step is just going to make more and more sense the more experience you'll get. But when it comes down to this method, when we have too much information, it's kind of unclear, because this is something that I still didn't work with. Usually, I never learned how to go from this stage, from too much information stage, to the things that we need to draw. Because again, every piece in here distracts me from things that I need to draw, and at the same time, they are the guides that will help me to draw it, not necessarily perfectly, but the best way that I could. And how to find a way to balance this still seems weird to me. I don't know. the fact that it presented in static and I need to understand how to put it in dynamic, and I need to make it inside of my mind, because again, we established that there's no way to create a controllable perspective in here, unfortunately. So because of that, we kind of need to make things kind of on our own. I don't know. Not understanding what cubes are going to represent what and how these cubes are going to be rotated, like what type of perspective they're going to obey, and etc. So these are kind of the things that kind of throw me a little bit. And I guess once you will start, the same as for not having any information, you just need to understand where to start. It kind of works for life too. Like, if you don't know where to start in life, if you feel overwhelmed, if you have too many things to choose from, or too much things to deal with, or whatever, break down these things into certain areas and just basically solve them one by one. Or find something that you're comfortable with, start with it, and then slowly build into something that you're not that comfortable in. And I guess I need to use that too, of course, because this is definitely something that I think will help. So as you see right now, I'm not using any knowledge of for these cubes. They completely sorry about that. They completely placed in a random places, so they're definitely not going to work. Ideally, I kind of need to delete this. I don't like the result. It's just basically going to distract me. Yeah, I actually created it just for the sake of sorry about that. I just created it for the sake of example. So let's just recreate it then. For myself personally, I found that the easiest way for me to start with solving a complex problem is to call it a try. So this has an interesting psychology to it. If you're going to look at certain element as the final element, so like it needs to be right away perfect, you're probably going to put too much pressure on yourself, and you're not going to find anything to start with, because everything needs to be perfect, and it kind of will make things much harder. But once you will put in your mind the kind of a statement that this thing is just going to be one of the tries, it will help you to start with this problem solving thing. Because again, then you're not going to put that much pressure on yourself by solving this problem. You're just going to try, see what's going to happen, and then maybe it will produce some cool results. And you could use it to solve this problem actually in a finalization state. I think I used the same approach for Angry Birds. I wasn't aware that I used the same approach to create them, but actually it kind of was the case, because remember what we had as a sketch? Completely awful drawings with horrible designs and everything else. The reason behind like why they were like that, because I put in mind the statement, or I don't know, some type of a proclamation, or I don't know how to properly say it, basically I stated to myself that it needs to be something as a try, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It was just a sketch, and this type of way of looking at it helped me to deal with this. The same kind of with transformers. Probably one of the reasons why we created this transformer here and and this guy, because I didn't thought about this thing as something final. I thought about this as just thing that will be a part of something that will help me to come up with the final thing. And the cool thing is, it actually worked. So without struggling that much with Transformers designs, we took the bad designs that were established previously and created out of them pretty cool designs that kind of work. And I guess the same we need to do for the Transformers. So I really tried to do that for the static. Again, this is the result. I kind of just look at this thing as a try, and in result it kind of ended up pretty cool. Still a lot of information probably needed in here, but as a try, as just a way to gain this confidence in your abilities that you will actually be able to solve this problem, it definitely beneficial and it definitely will help. But still, before doing this, I guess we still need to lay down information about how dynamic is going to be represented, because for now we just have information about the static, and while creating this thing, the static information actually served us well. So I guess that means that we actually need to create now a dynamic representation of each of the cubes that were established. So the one thing that will stay static, I guess, was just in a half an hour that we left, establish, finally continue, or finally start to do something. So this is going to be static. The shoulders are going to be static. The pelvis is actually not going to be static. It will change. It will slightly tilt. So there definitely a tilt is going to be present. Snappish. So I think for the most part, the things that are going to be tilted will be I don't think that the things are actually will stay tilted. Just kind of a weird, everything will change in direction. There's no element that will stay the same. This is a weird thing about that though. So let's just open our pose and see the actual boxes. So for that, of course, we're going to use our box shape thing, mannequin, which will provide us with a little bit more information. So again, considering where the z-axis is, yeah, looking at where the z-axis is, yeah, let's just assume that this is our z-axis, because it's not, but it is actually. So from the static to dynamic, there's definitely significant tilt to the right, rotation to the right, or to the left if we're going to look at this from here. Legs are a little bit open in these areas because they kind of put in a stance position or balanced position or the battle ready position, I don't know. Arms are, yeah, for arms we actually need to look at mannequin itself, because mannequin has pretty good understanding where the biceps are going to look at, and etc. So the bicep actually looks almost inside, so the rotation is pretty significant. This hand is rotated almost 90 degrees, and right here it is the in-between tilt. This part of the arm is kind of almost straight without that much of a rotation. Slight rotation definitely present. So yeah, let's just analyze this one, because again, I'm just going to analyze it on the second monitor. I'm trying to come up with the proper rotations for everything. So again, as we established, pelvis is definitely going to be tilted a lot, but less than for the female. Is going to be a little bit more straight. And the same kind of goes for this one. For the rib cage, it's not going to be that because again, females' bodies are usually more flexible, and because of the placement of the pelvis, the placement for the rib cage will change too, because again, we need to remember about counterbalance. If something will be tilted, it needs to provide a counterbalance to it on top, because that way the weight distribution is going to be properly placed. It all depends on the weight distribution. If, for instance, our model is skinny, that way the weight distribution is going to be based on the skeleton for the most part. If we have a obese character or model, in that particular instance, the places of fat are going to overweigh the skeleton for the most part, and skeleton will adapt to it. And these changes are going to be a little bit harder to actually kind of see, because again, depending on the level of obesity, it could change. But for the most part, the balance for the obese person and the weight distribution for the obese person and skinny person will completely going to be different, and we need to understand that. Although the law of gravity will stay the same and everything else will stay the same, they're going to behave a little bit differently when it comes down to at least the results. So the results are going to be differently because it all depends on this. The reason why I'm talking about this is because for the transformer, first we're going to work with model is going to be a male model, and this is an actual female model. And because again, I still don't have a finished male model. Again, the model itself is finished, but all these controllers are not placed properly yet. So because of that, we kind of working with a female as our base, and again, we just need to find a proper way to understand when things are going to work for female and male, and find where the difference is going to be in the posing, because it's going to be present definitely, because again, female body has a little bit more grace to it and male body has less grace to it. It's just going to feel more, I don't know, somewhat restricted by the muscles. Again, it all depends on the complexity. Of course, if a person is skinny, like for instance me, I'm pretty skinny, and because of my build, like I'm pretty flexible, and like for skinny people, they could be gracious if they want because they have this ability. They kind of could put themselves in pretty graceful poses because they are flexible enough, because they don't have that much of a restriction in the muscle structure, but pretty build up by build, I don't know, muscly built character or person will definitely, because of his or her musculature, is just going to restrict the grace in it, and person is going to be appear less graceful, and by less graceful I mean less curves are going to be present. It's all about almost that, because the grace gives us a curvatures. The more curvatures we have, the more graceful things will look. Okay, let's just hide things in here. Again, I put this thing in the second monitor right now. I'm going to use it. My second monitor on top. Okay, so in almost 25 minutes we will finish, but before that, finally the good thing is that psychologically I figured it out how to overcome this barrier that I felt, and one of the ways to do that, I repeat myself, is to look at this thing as a try. So not to look at this thing as something that you need to create as a final, but actually look at this thing as some type of a sketch, or in between sketch, like in between super bad sketch and final sketch. That will help you to create things, basically, at least it will help you to start somewhere, because you're not going to start with the thought that I have too much pressure and I need to right away produce a final result, but actually you will start with the idea that no matter what I'm going to draw right now, it's just going to be a one step closer to the final, but not necessarily a final. And by setting your mind to it, it will just basically free you from shackles of pressure, and will help you to spread the wings and basically fly into freedom of trying, or should I say sketching or whatever, and not feel restricted by the fact that it needs to be finalized right away. And then finalization is just going to be the same as we did for Angry Birds and for everything else. So it's just going to be a additional layer upon already existing one, which was the try. So for instance, if we would represent this in static, I think if I will polish it, could be a final thing. Like, this is first iteration of it, then I would make legs a little bit better, etc, 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 and then eventually it could be pretty decent result. Kind of. I don't know, maybe we need to use it though, because I kind of tried to implement design things in here already, and since right now we know how these things need to behave, like how legs need to be spread out, could actually utilize this in here. Because again, ideally we need to use every information that we discovered so far, and sometimes the try that we did just to make sure that we will be able to deal with this problem actually will give us more confidence than just an empty canvas, or the canvas with overwhelming amount of information in the forms of two different projections, side view and front view, with cubes for static, with potential cubes for dynamic. So it's just going to be too overwhelming to deal with, and we're just not going to know where to start. And again, one of the ways to deal with this is just consider things as a first try, not consider things as something that needs to be right away finalized. So just think about things as your, I don't know, this is just another iteration. We're one step closer to the final work. By looking at this that way, it will definitely help you to bring this pattern of procrastination if you're feeling it. If you feel like you're not kind of shorted, you will be able to make stuff the right way. So yeah, let's just deal with this try for now. I kind of want to explore it just to prepare myself for an actual thing. So the one thing that we established for this pose, that the elbow is rather static. So not the elbow, but yeah. So this part is kind of rather static. It's slightly maybe shifted, but for the most part it rather stays static. And the things that are tilted are these things. And again, they're not tilted that much. They're kind of barely tilt. Yeah, it kind of seems weird. It seems like his hands are, or arms are, super broken. I guess the reason behind that is we need to place them higher. So these things are actually need to be shorter. I guess this is too much of a tilt. It's to be. And the sword itself is going to be somewhere in here. The sword. We're going to establish it as a big sword. Handle is going to be somewhere in this area. Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. Nom nom. Yeah, I'm almost done. Like 15 minutes to go. Wanna sleep. Next week I definitely will slowly get back to the full schedule, because again, like right now this week was brought to a normal schedule. By that I mean the normal way of streaming. So like we got back all streams, type of streams. So the creative streams were back week before, but this week we kind of worked with bringing back the gaming streams. So, and because of that, because we brought back gaming streams now, but they weren't in the full schedule unfortunately yet, because we had to again, Transformers' arms are pretty big. Let's say they're super big. Yeah, it's definitely going to go through a lot of trials and errors in order to properly place this transformer in the proper pose and the proper proportions, because we need to understand that like once we will put our initial design that we designed for the transformer, which was created in the static or in projections in the front view, side view, once we will do that, to translate all of these proportions inside of a extreme perspective, like even if you're going to try to project these in a regular perspective, it's going to be probably challenging if you don't have that much of experience. But if you're going to try to implement, like to put it into a little bit more complex perspective, it's of course going to be much more challenging. And I guess this is a good thing, because usually the more challenging things are, the more possible room for growth. But so this thing definitely needs to become bigger. So yeah, legs need to be slightly far apart, so they kind of going to be slightly far apart. This is not slightly, this is actually too much. So is this one probably. And again, we need to think about a lot of stuff when we're dealing with this. So we need to think about keeping the design intact. We need to think about proportions. We need to think about how these proportions are going to change in perspective, especially because again, we need to understand the original proportions in order to understand how to put these original proportions into a existing perspective. And it actually will be challenging, no matter what I'm going to, what you're going to do and how much of an experience you're going to have. It's definitely going to be challenging either way. The cool thing is, like, you see how the try word, or the setting my mind to a try mode and not as a final mode, helped me to deal with this problem. So it's just basically right away eliminates the psychological barrier, which is super awesome. And although it's pretty far from perfect in here, but it's a good warm-up before creating another layer, because again, we need to build upon something or on something. We need to build one layer, or we need to build another layer based on the previous layer. And if we don't have a previous layer, how the heck we could build upon it? Like, and we can create a second layer until we understand what was on the first layer. And this is kind of things work. And although this is not our first layer, it actually probably a third or whatever layer, maybe even fifth layer. It all depends through how many levels we went through. Again, by layers I mean the more information we get about this transformer, the better basically by the way. I think these legs need to be much bigger towards the... Because again, remember there's a distortion that goes in here, and everything that's there just needs to be bigger. Because if I'm going to make these legs are smaller, it's just going to look weird. Or not smaller, but yeah. They kind of have to be big. So again, things on here are smaller, then they get bigger. Let's just save this one. So yeah, this is kind of a thing, and again, the last thing that we talk about is the layers, because I guess this is a valid point to cover. Oh, freaking creek. What the heck with the knees though? Yeah, remember this, that legs are definitely kind of big in here. Not legs, but yeah. They kind of create this big stuff in here. All these things create additional layers for us to work with, and it adds new information for us to use. And I can't stress enough how important these things are. So if we will talk about layers, how many layers we went through in order to end up into it, like for these transformers. Again, this is not even the final layer, it's definitely additional layer, but again, the reason why we come up with this one right now was thanks to a first layer of the initial design, second layer, or first was just a picture or the imagination, then a couple of references, I guess, that we gathered on the internet. They definitely give us a little bit more understanding how to put this pose, then working on composition, then working on poses, then working on actual design of the transformer, then working on the sketch of this transformer after design, so basically implementing the design to it, then understanding that the information about this design is not enough, we need to actually, wait, where is it? And we actually need to put, we need to analyze it in a much more deeper level. Then we sculpted it, and after we sculpted it, it actually gives us like whatever we have now. And again, the more experience you will get, the less stages you need to go through in order to come up with the final thing. And although this is not a final, we still need to go through a couple of more iteration or so-called passes. Again, the more experience you have, the less passes you need to go through. The more experience you have, the less passes you need to go through. Yeah, and the less experience you have, the more passes you need to go through. So it's kind of the thing, and one of the reasons why I'm going through a lot of passes when it comes down to transformers, because again, I consider this form pretty complex. Again, remember our let's open our thing. Where is it? Here it is. So yeah, remember our model. Again, this model is kind of complex, and the complexity of this model need to be represented in 2D with maintaining proportions, maintaining the look, the overall look of it, kind of trying to keep the designs at least in their origins. Not necessarily everything needs to be repeated as in here, but most of the things would be cooler if they would repeat it. The complexity of legs, or the complexity of a lot of things, so the arms and etc. So it was definitely one of the most important pieces of information that we but actually created on our own. This transformer sculpt actually allowed us to kind of analyze things in a little bit better and deeper level. So we have about 4 minutes till the end. Again, creating this pose definitely helped us to kind of picture the small aspects of posing a certain elements, especially for the legs, because before that I wasn't sure how I'm going to create these legs and how I'm going to make it like look pretty badass when it comes onto the statue. And only after going through this stage, it kind of added this information. The whole point of like rotating legs a little bit to outward, the pelvis tilts, the arms crossed and holding a sword, yeah, the head tilts on a little bit better level, the understanding how this part of the arm is going to be rotated actually using the basic anatomy of movement. So understanding the restrictions of the human body when it comes down to rotation. So again, every information that we gathered so far was 100% helpful. So no useless things were done. Although we spent a lot of time on figuring out the rotations for each cube, again, it's still going to be utilized, it's still going to be implemented into this illustration. Maybe not directly, but indirectly definitely, because again, if we want to like implement it directly, it's just going to take us a lot of time. And since we're not established that these results that we come up with understanding the rotation are 100% conclusive, we can't make sure that there's just no need to spend excessive amount of time to implement things that not 100% working. And these results are not by any means final. They are just a additional layer, but again, this layer will definitely help us to understand how to rotate these things a little bit better. So this is kind of a semi-static. I wouldn't say that this is a static. The only thing that we need to rotate is the head in here. Most of the things are kind of sorry about that. Most of the things are kind of already rotated. So for instance, I rotated this part. Maybe we need to rotate a knee a little bit bigger, like a little bit to the outward. The same kind of goes for the body itself. I think we need to rotate body a little bit to our side. It will kind of suggest that transformers are not just looking at them, but actually kind of putting more gesture towards the Angry Birds with their actual movement. So because if person wants to act on something or at something, how to properly say it, basically you will see that most of the body engages into movement towards that. If just a head acts towards it, it's probably not going to be that clear that this person or character is actually suggesting that he or she is going to act towards that goal, aim, whatever, target. So and by moving the body itself, it definitely will suggest a little bit more body involvement towards the Angry Birds, and it actually will suggest a little bit more that these transformers are not done, and they actually will answer to the Quintessa's I don't know, I still don't know how I'm going to like show her, the Quintessa. Do I need to show her as dead, or she's going to be still alive and she's slowly fading? So this is kind of a still unanswered question. It is going to be answered on the final stages, which are almost there. So yeah, let's just finish on that note, because again, I will leave you with that again. If you feel like you don't know where to go and you're stuck in your illustration, and if the reason behind that usually in the fear that you're not think like you able to proceed to the next stage, stop looking at it as the final thing and try to look at it as something, as like another or pre-iteration or pre-finalization of what's going to be actually finalized then. That way you will basically free your mind from this pressure, and the pressure will be lift up, and it will help you to breathe, solve this problem in this iteration, and on its own it will create more confidence to create an actual final. It's going to have more information that you need to cover, and then the only thing that you need to do is just to draw over it or paint over it a final version of it and make it a little bit more accurate. So again, we're working with layers. This is the way that visualization works. The more information that we have, the visual information, the associate based information, what I mean usually by that is the text, the words that could create associations in our mind. All this information, references of course, all this information will help us to kind of add layer by layer and actually solve the problem more efficiently. And again, the only thing that will probably separate the beginner from a pro when it comes down to the layers is just how many layers each of those will go through. Beginner will probably go through a bunch of layers, where the pro probably will draw things right away or will go through a couple of passes or layers. So beginner will probably go through at least 10 iterations, even more, and pro will probably stick to 2-3 max. So there's going to be an initial sketch, there's going to be an actual sketch or final sketch, and there's going to be a final illustration. So usually 3 stages are will be present. And the funny thing is, beginners going to go through these stages too. There's going to be an initial sketch, there's going to be a final sketch, and there's definitely going to be a final work and final illustration and finished. But in between those 3 are just going to be bigger. The gap between those in terms of how many iterations are going to be done before achieving the middle part and the final part are just going to vary depending on your level of experience and the level of your confidence, like how confident you are that you're going to be able to solve this problem. So yeah, I guess on that note we will end the session. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here, have a nice day or night, and we'll definitely see you in the next session, which is going to be on Wednesday when it comes down to creative sessions. And if you're down to gaming, then on Monday. By the way, either on Monday or on Tuesday, maybe even on Wednesday, streams are going to be streamed in a little bit of different time, I guess. Either they're going to be streamed later, or again, I'm still going to keep up with the same kind of schedule as it was this week. Streams are not going to be super consistent when it comes down to the hours that I'm going to stream. The smallest stream is definitely going to be an hour, and the biggest stream is probably going to be 3-4 hours depending on the time. But closer to the end of the week, I will definitely get back to the 4-hour streams, I guess, or at least closer to that. And starting from next week, I definitely will bring back the full streams if nothing will change, of course. So this is kind of a update. And definitely next week I will implement a lot of new changes to the, again, as I said, to the way that I'm going to stream, usually on the technical part of it. So the settings of videos, the way that I'm streaming, and etc. So basically, hopefully it's not going to change that much, but if it is, maybe something new will be added, maybe something will be kind of withdrawn, I don't know, we'll see. So on that note, we'll definitely end the session. So kind of bye, see you next time.